In this unit, we're going to consider the specific threats and opportunities which come from competitors. Before we look at uncovering the issues, there are two important points to make. The first is that when we assess a competitive threat, we have to consider two aspects: what the competitor is doing right now and what we expect them to do in the future. If we don't consider the likely moves and responses from the competitor, then we leave ourselves open to attack. So in particular, we need to think about how we expect a competitor to respond to our initiatives. And in some ways, it's a bit like a game of chess, where we're constantly thinking ahead several moves to figure out what the competitor is likely to do, and therefore what should we do about it. Here's an example to show you what I mean. Let's take a simple situation where we have an existing supplier to a key account and a new company from another country trying to break into the market. We're going to use a simple analytical model. It's known as the cycle of competition. And this model simply plots action, response. So we'll see two columns of actions: the existing supplier on the left, new entrant on the right. And starting at the top left gives us the current situation: a current, dominant, confident supplier. A new competitor sees an opportunity to grow after the more vulnerable key account business and win it. But the existing supplier doesn't take this threat seriously and doesn't respond, which just encourages the new supplier to go after more business with the key account. Finally, the existing supplier responds, but in a crude way, by cutting the price, and so triggering a price war, because the new supplier then launches an all-out attack based on price. Having been taken unawares and responding in such an obvious way, the existing supplier now takes a more strategic view and counterattacks the new supplier in its own home market. And that forces the new supplier to reduce its focus in the new market to go back and protect its home business. So what we're seeing here is a simple example of the moves and counter moves of two suppliers. Some intelligent moves and some not so clever. You can imagine this scenario playing out over and over again. And quite an interesting exercise you may like to try later is to take a similar situation in your own market and consider what you'd do. And this is a good example of an exercise to do with colleagues. The final point I want to make before we get into the analysis itself is to ensure that when we do assess a competitor, we have to ensure that our assessment is objective. Now, this sounds simple, but the problem is that for many account managers, their competitive assessments are based on assumptions, received wisdom, and hope. So as a result, we often find that the competitive threat is both overestimated and underestimated at the same time. So for example, we might underestimate a competitive innovation which offers an advantage, but overestimate the competitor's willingness to cut the price. As a result, we could find ourselves with a less attractive offer and a reduced price. So when we consider competitors, we have to use an evidence-based approach and test our belief. And this means that you have to cite evidence to back up your claim. So if you think a competitor has a reputation for poor quality, then we need to see some evidence. For example, it's losing business with its more demanding customers. If we think a competitor has a better delivery system, then cite evidence to show the advantages it's getting. When a colleague makes a statement about a competitor, ask for firm evidence. Don't just take common understanding as the truth. Okay, so let's look at what we should know about our main competitors. The main point here is that, once again, there's a difference between knowledge and information. What do I mean? Well, lots of companies collect lots of information, but it doesn't necessarily provide them with knowledge. Collecting lots of information is not going to help you if all this information just sits in a file in a corporate office. What we want to know is knowledge that will cause us to take action. So if you're in any doubt about whether the information you're collecting is useful, just ask yourself, what will I do as a result of knowing this? And if the answer's nothing, then you have to question why you want it. To help us figure out what information to collect, we asked practicing key account managers how they judge the value of competitive information. Here are the top 5 most common responses. Thank you.
I want to feel confident that I know their strengths and weaknesses. This tells me what to attack and defend. I want to know which battles to fight and which to leave. I want to test my own plan to predict the competitor response. I want to be able to take an objective view when the key account threatens me with a competitor, especially when demanding a price reduction. I want to take action to neutralize the threat before it is made. I want to know the best opportunities for me. I want to know where the competitor is vulnerable. Everyone knows who their competitors are. I thought I knew all about them, but really, I had never asked the difficult questions. A lot of the things we said about our competitors were not really true. We just wanted them to be true. It was not till we sat down and really analysed them that we found out.